Hi guys, welcome to the Cambridge Creatives Q&A with Nicola Shindler. I'm Hannah, the co-president of Cambridge Creatives.
Hi, I'm Majela, the social media officer. Thank you for supporting Cambridge Creatives. We are a student-run creative collective. We're curating a series of talks with world-renowned professionals in film, television and theatre, so please follow our Facebook page to find out more about future events and opportunities. Just a couple of housekeeping rules before we begin. If you have any questions for our guest speaker, please type them into the Q&A function, not in the chat. It's down below, and we'll read them out for you. And also, please bear with us if there are any technical difficulties, and let us know in the chat if there are any problems hearing or seeing us. And enjoy the Q&A.
So just a little introduction for our guest today. Nicola Shindler is a renowned television producer, having won 11 BAFTAs. She set up Red Production Company in 1998 to work with the best writers in original television drama. Since then, she has produced some of the UK's most popular and award-winning series, such as Happy Valley, Last Tango and Halifax, and Lenny Henry's first screenplay, Danny and the Human Zoo. Most recently, Nicola produced Years and Years, written by Russell T Davies, and was appointed CCO of StudioCanal UK. We are really honoured to have this trailblazing producer and Cambridge alumna speak with us today. So my first question for you, Nicola, is when did you know that you wanted to be a producer or even work in TV?
I didn't even know really what a producer was. So when I turned up at Cambridge, I wanted to go there because I knew that it had such a strong reputation for theatre, and I wanted at the time to be a theatre director. So it was through working my way through theatre that I realised what I really like doing is working with writers. And then because I knew that I liked television just because I watched television, I applied for a job that was advertised as a trainee script editor because someone told me that that was how you work with writers. And even though I didn't get that job, I got a lower down job and then gradually worked my way up to producers. So producing wasn't an aim in the end. It was just about, my passion was about telling stories and about putting good stories on television. And that's what I realised that I had to do in order to do that.
I was going to say, how involved were you in theatre or film at Cambridge?
There wasn't really any opportunity for film involvement, but lots in theatre. So I would direct a different play every single term. So sometimes inside my college, then much more in the university. And I kind of just made sure that I always had one play that I was directing the whole time, so that I was always involved all the way through.
How would you say your time at Cambridge, or even with your degree, prepared you for your future projects in your future career?
Doing all that work in theatre was brilliant because I learned how to graft and understand the different aspects of production, and because you don't have a great big team behind you, you end up doing everything anyway. So I was producing as much as I was directing. So I think I learned a lot. Also, the people that I met there, oh, I'm sorry, just one sec.
No worries.
The people who I met in the world of theatre were people who often wanted to do it professionally as well. So a lot of the people I work with now, I know from Cambridge. So either actors or writers or other producers. So it was amazing and really lucky to be able to have that network really early on. And also I think that's where I learned that what I really liked was new writing. So most productions at that time were revivals of classics or Shakespeare, but I realised I wanted to work on new voices. So I met people who wanted to be writers really early on, and I worked on new work with them. So I was actually working on what I wanted to do really early, which was work with people who wanted to write, new ideas, to develop new stories. So I think from about my second year, I was doing that already.
Wow. That's really cool, yeah. So you said that you applied to be a trainee script editor and didn't get that role. So what was your first role at university, and then how was it sort of working up to being a producer from that role?
When I left university, I wanted to work in the theatre. So I applied for a job at the Royal Court Theatre in London, which was always known as the home of new writing. But the job I went for was called sales manager, and it was nothing to do with what I wanted to do, but it was just a way to get there. And they'd never had any marketing there, so it was like the first marketing role, which basically putting leaflets in envelopes for hours on end. But what I made sure that I did was talk to the people who worked on the new writing, and talked and got myself involved in scouting for new plays and going to see all the new writers, not during my work time in the evening. So I saw a lot of really bad plays, but through that I kind of got experience about how to talk about writing and how to talk about scripts, and met a few agents, and it was through the agents that they said to me, "Oh, apply for a job in television instead, because that's much more what you want to do." So actually, I did get a job as a trainee script editor. I applied for a job as a script editor, and then that job was literally sitting in a basement in the BBC reading thousands of scripts that were sent to them, because the BBC had to read every single script that came. So I would read, you know, like 20 scripts a day and do reports on those scripts, and never found one that wasn't insane. There was no good ones. But then again, I just made sure that I was in the right meetings at the right time, and I was listening to what people wanted, and I was giving ideas. And because I'd had all that experience learning about writers from when I was going around all those the theatre venues, I kind of put that to good use, and I mentioned writers to other producers. And I eventually, someone who I was working with as a trainee script editor, they knew a job that was going as a script editor, and I went for that job, which was in Granada, back in Manchester, making something called Cracker as a trainee script editor. And I very quickly went from script editor to producer.
So how was that transition from theatre into television?
For me, it was like I'd found my home, because even though I love a lot about theatre, actually I find a lot of it really frustrating as well. So I don't think there's enough rigor put into writing and editing. I think people talk too much. And so for me, television is much more something that I'm more comfortable with, because I like the visual storytelling. I like stories having lots of pace and lots of energy. And I found in theatre, it was lots of long scenes and lots of long conversations. So it just felt like totally the right place for me to be. It was a really different world. The BBC at that time was not, you know, nothing like it is now. It was quite old-fashioned. It was very much run by men. There weren't any women in the senior producing roles at all. It was really hierarchical. It was very snobby is a bad word, but it had, like, you know, everyone wanted to work with certain writers, and soaps were really looked down upon. And I think, and I watched over 10 years all that change upside down. All the people who came in with me, most of whom were women, ended up running all those departments. And then what became a successful television program was something that ran and ran for a long time. So everything shifted. But when I went in there, it was quite a stuffy place to be.
And did you find that your work as a script editor and reading all those new works was good preparation for eventually becoming a producer?
Yeah, because a producer has to run everything. So a producer is over every part of the production. But what they are nothing without a good script, because no production is anything without a good script. So that has to be your primary focus. So because still now I can run a company, or I can run 5 different productions, but all that matters really is that we've got great scripts to make. And once you've got great scripts to make, then you can get a great cast, and you can get a great director, and you can bring all those people on. So yes, that's the primary skill. It's just about storytelling. It's as much as anything else. It's about knowing a good story, knowing a story that people want to watch, knowing what draws people towards a story. It's all the same skill, really.
That's so interesting. So would you say you have like any tips for students who may like want to follow in your footsteps, perhaps?
Well, I would say know what you want to do, because there's nothing more frustrating than having someone say, I want to work in television, because that doesn't really mean anything. It's such a disparate skill group. I couldn't make I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. I could watch it, but I can't make it. I can't make Last Night at the Proms, whatever, but I can make good drama. So it's about, why do you want to do something? I wanted to do it because I wanted to tell stories, and I wanted to work with writers. So I knew which part I wanted to go to. So people should find out what it is they really want to do. And then if it's what I did, then I would say watch absolutely every bit of drama that's out there. Learn what you like and what you don't like, because there's no right or wrong. There's certain kind of dramas that work for some people and others work for others. Look at who makes those dramas. Every time you watch something you like, write down the name of the production company, write down the name of the producer, write down the director, write down the writer, so that when you're ready to go out there and try and get work, you know who you're targeting. Go to those people and say specifically, I liked your program because, without it becoming an English literature essay. It's just, you know, this is why I enjoyed the programme, and this is the kind of programmes I want to make. Can I, first of all, probably the lowest rung for drama is reading. So it's, can I do some reading for you? And you might get some freelance work that way. Or they might just ask you to do some reading as an example so that they can see how you report on things and what your taste is like. But it's about badgering those people, really. It's not easy, but you just got to keep going. And at the same time as trying to get into the formal official places, I would always try and do your own work as well. So try and put on some fringe theatre. Try and, you know, make sure that you're still working with writers that you met who are your age, who don't have any experience either. Try and make a short film. You know, just do everything that you can to kind of get some work under your belt at the same time as trying to get into established places. And be prepared to work really hard.
So what would you say is like the best route into the industry? Because obviously you didn't go to film school yourself. Would you suggest that people sort of go there or then go the other route where they sort of try and get a foot in the door immediately rather than?
It depends what they want to do. I think for directors, probably film school is more important than for producers, because it, you know, there's a lot of technical skills that you need to learn. And also because as a director, you have to have not evidence of, but you know, you have to have work to show people. Whereas as a producer, you can talk your way in more. So, you know, if people want to get further education and they want to look at film schools, then there are producer courses as well. But I would say get on a set, get on a film set as soon as you can. Go and try and be a runner, watch how it works, understand, you know, there's 60 people doing different jobs in front of you. You have to know what every single one of those people is doing if you're a producer. And you have to understand how you can use them better, how you can get better work out of everyone. You have to know what that film set is. So really, you do need to be on the ground and understanding it that way.
So now kind of onto the role of a producer, how would you specifically define your job? And could you, maybe not in a corona world, but run us through like a kind of a day in the life?
Yeah, so I'm now not a producer, I'm an executive producer. And the difference is that I no longer hands-on produce a show on set. So I'll tell you both. As a producer, you literally wake up with your crew, not literally wake up with your crew, you get up and you go to set at the same time as everyone else. And you are there probably from 6:30 in the morning, and you're tackling that day's shoot and all the issues that will arise. You have what's called a call sheet, which says every scene that's going to be shot that day. You should have spoken to the director in advance to understand what shots they're going to do. You have recce'd a location in advance, so you know where you're going to be. The design team, the lighting team, everyone should know exactly what they're doing. But there will be 20 problems every hour that you have to be there to solve. You have to talk to the actors if that's what they need. You have to make sure they look right. You have to make sure that what the director's shooting is the material that you know is wanted. Sometimes people go off or don't quite cover the story or cover the scene. You have to stand by the camera and be able to say, I need you to do that again. Or, you know, and it's dealing with people and different personalities the whole time, because you actually, to just say to a director, I want you to redo that, can cause huge problems. And the problem with producing hands-on on set is every minute of every day is costing hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's such an expensive thing to do. So you have to balance, is that worth trying to go again? I know that I've got 5 scenes to do this afternoon. If I slow us down now, that'll cause problems later. So you're constantly balancing. And like I said, if you keep the script in your mind the whole time, then you tend to make the right decisions. Because if you're saying, actually, we do need to go again because we didn't cover that story beat and the whole edit won't hold together, then it's worth risking things. But if you think, do you know what, I'm just being a perfectionist and it'll be okay and no one else will notice, then you carry on. So it's constantly making those decisions, right through to that you're kind of on set, I would say, from 6:30 till 6:30 every, at least 12 hours every day. And that's when you're filming. When you're not filming, you're in pre-production and then you're editing. But as an executive producer, my role is slightly different. So because I was running a production company for a long time, what my job was to find projects from the very beginning and nurture them, and then to sell the project. So what that means is a writer could come to me that I know with an idea and say, just one line idea. and I have to work out whether I can get that made, try and encourage them in the right way to make it either more commercial or something which I think will be easier to get made, nurture that idea until we've got an idea strong enough that I would then take to a broadcaster. So I would sit there and go, is this right for BBC One? Is it more Netflix? Is it, Amazon? There's so many options now. Is it Channel 4? And I know all the people who run those channels. I have to get to know them. I have to go and listen to what they want and understand what they need. And then I go and sell the project with the writer or the producer, if there's a producer on it already. And we go and we pitch it and we try and make it sound so enticing. And either they'll commission a script, or I've already commissioned a script, and they'll commission a series. And so from the moment you sold it, you then have to work out how to get the money, because even if you sell it to the BBC, for example, you need more money than they give. So I have to sell it around the world to a number of different people. You have to get the budget together, and part of that is about finding the right director who everyone's excited by. So I interview a lot of directors and listen to what they think about the material. And then you have to get the right actors. And sometimes you get the actors at the very beginning, and sometimes you get the actors later. Often now, because there's so many different channels, getting a starry name is more important to getting something made. So you have to factor that in as well. That's all before you start production. Then when you start production, you have to work on more scripts. So you have to make sure all the scripts are ready by the time you start shooting. It could be 4, 6, 8, however many you're doing. You have to work with the director and the producer on finding the right locations. That can just change a production enormously depending on where you shoot. The designer comes into it at that point, so you have to select the designer, and they're really important because you have to brief them about how it should feel. You can make something that feels very kitchen sink, or you can make something that feels really heightened, and you have to decide what's right for that material. You cast all the other parts at that point, and then you start filming. And my job as an executive producer when we're filming is to watch every single day the rushes, which is what was filmed the day before, and then go back to them with any notes, any pickups, any changes, thinking about the same thing that the producer's thinking about, which is, oh my God, financially, is it worth asking for something else? Sometimes I'll just say, look, I think it's fine what we've got, but it could be better if. So I'm constantly talking to the director and the producer when they're filming. And then we start editing, and that's also a massive part of the job because it's almost like a rewrite. You sit with an assembly, which is the whole script in order, and then the director goes away for 2 weeks and tries to reduce it down to length and can make changes. And then I sit in an edit with the writer normally, and we give a load of notes because it's never right first time round. So you do it again and again until 3 or 4 edits, and then you have to send it to the people who paid for it, the broadcasters, and they give their notes. And then you do a sound edit. I'm sure I'm boring you all now, but you do the same thing with the sound, which is you add lots of sound, you add lots of music, you decide whether the music's right, and then the picture as well, you finesse the picture. So it's kind of an epic job to get from an idea to an end product that goes on television.
Indeed. And as an executive producer, and previously having had your own production company, do you feel a real responsibility in choosing which projects to produce and what kind of stories to broadcast? I mean, for example, Hillsborough must have been a really important story to tell, and as well as years and years looking at sort of this rise of populism. Do you feel passionately about which stories you want to tell?
Yeah, always. But sometimes I feel passionately because they're really funny and they're easy and they're going to just please people. And sometimes it's because I think they've got something really important to say. Hillsborough was my first job as a producer. So that was, I was really lucky to be asked to do that. And I was asked to do it because everyone thought it'd be a very small thing that no one would watch. So, but it was really important for me to tell that story once I'd spoken to the writer about what the true story was. With something like Years and Years, I've worked with Russell T Davies, who wrote it for 20 years. And he had said to me 8 years ago, oh, I want to do something. I can see I was getting to the point where there's going to be modern versions of concentration camps. And that's going to be either because of immigration or because of housing problems or class or, everything. And the idea molded him for like 6 years. And then once Brexit happened, once Trump got elected and things got more and more extreme, he said, oh, now's the time, I have to do this now because world events are taking over. And we managed to persuade the BBC. It wasn't an easy one to get commissioned, actually, that this is the right story for them to tell. And then just at the last minute, we got money from America, from HBO as well, which meant that we could make it, we could afford to make it. But it was quite a difficult one to get going, even though it ended up being very successful.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you've worked with Russell T Davies for about 20 years, and you've also worked multiple times with like Sally Wainwright and also Chris Eccleston. Do you find it better to work with people in teams that you already know, or do you prefer to sort of branch out and try something new with different projects?
It depends what's right for the project. So working with someone like Russell is just a joy, so I will do that for as long as he'll have me. And also he comes with brilliant original ideas, so I'd be a fool not to do it. With Sally, I worked with her for lots of years because one project after led to another. And then with the actors, I try not to use the same actors too many times because it does look like lack of imagination. But there are really some really good actors, and when I know them, when I can get them, and when they make a difference to how much money you can bring to the production, then again, it's foolish not to, really. And there are some brilliant actors in this country, so I will work with them, as you know, so long as the role's right.
Interesting. So you were recently appointed the CCO of StudioCanal UK, and you're sort of in charge of new in-house film production to develop British films. How does film production differ from television production, would you say?
So I'm not doing that job anymore. Just so you know. That was a couple of years ago, and I took that on because I was working with StudioCanal in television as well. So they came to me and said, would you be interested in developing British films? Because they're a French company who make predominantly French films and big American films, and they wanted to develop more British films. So I thought it'd be interesting to see where the film is really different from television. And even though the creative process isn't different, in that you want a good story and you want a good writer and you want a way of telling it, the process of film production is so different from television, and not one that I particularly enjoy, because most of it is about, even though I've said a lot about the money in television, in film it's only about raising the budget, and the way you raise a budget in film is so different. In television, the broadcasters have a set amount of hours that they have to fill, so there is money there, and it's about whether you can win that money or not. In film, you don't have to make film. So, you know, there will always be American studio films that are coming down the line. So what's very hard is to convince people to give you the budget. And they are obsessed in film with names. So they're obsessed with actors in a way that television isn't. And they're obsessed with directors as well. So it isn't really a producer's medium as much, film. It's much more about the director. And the writers are much less important in film, which I don't think is right. So you're in a position where you have a great script, but if you haven't got a director who enough people think is up and coming or is exciting or has made some money, then you don't get to make the film. And also the way they decide what your budget is so arbitrary. It's all based on business and marketing and past results, none of it based on instinct or passion for the project. So I just didn't find it very interesting. So I'm no longer doing films.
Sounds about right. Now moving on to specific television projects, how did you become involved in Last Tango and Halifax? And was this your first collaboration with Sally Wainwright?
No, I've worked with Sally years before that. So my first collaboration with Sally was something called Spark House, which is a modern version of Wuthering Heights with Heathcliff as a woman. So it kind of reversed the sexes and it brought it up to date. And I wanted to work with her because she used to make a program called At Home with the Braithwaites, which was a big mainstream show about a woman who wins the lottery and hides it from her family. And I just thought it was so well written and so clever. So she came to me with that idea, which I really liked, and we enjoyed working with each other. And so she came to me with another idea, actually two ideas. One was something she dreamt, which was a story called Unforgiven, which was we made with Saran Jones, about a woman who gets released from prison and goes looking for the sister that she tried to protect when she went to prison. And that, while we were doing that, we were talking to police advisors, and we started talking about female police officers, and started working on a series called Scott and Bailey, which we then did 5 series of. So it was I'd been working with Sally for ages before Last Tango and Halifax came up. And that came about because she told me about her mum, who once her dad died, her mum reconnected with an old school romance and ended up marrying that person very quickly and bringing together these two different families. So it was based on that, but totally different characters brought by Sally. Yeah, and we just were very, very lucky and worked really hard to get such a good cast, because I think the reason it lasted for so long is because that cast was so extraordinary.
It is amazing. They are the best pair. I was going to say, how involved were you in the casting for the series, and were Derek Jacobi and Anne Reid your top choices?
Anne Reid definitely was, and that's not to say that Derek isn't a top choice. It's just that I can't think of a woman like that without thinking of Anne Reid. I think she's extraordinary, just as she was in Years and Years, and from the very beginning that was her voice in Years and Years. I absolutely love, I think she's such a clever actress. She's very funny, but also she's really quite tough as well. And instead of being a cute older woman, she's quite a mean character, and she's, you know, got lots of flaws, and Anne isn't scared of playing that at all. So she was always there. And then Derek, no, we talked about a lot of different people for that role, but when we found out Derek was interested and we saw the chemistry between him and Annie, then it just became a no-brainer, really. He didn't audition, it's just that we saw they knew each other and they got on so well.
So for Last Tango and Halifax, as well as Happy Valley, there's like sets and filmed in Yorkshire. Do you enjoy having a range of locations for different projects and sort of getting out of the London bubble and moving out of there?
Well, I'm not in the London bubble anyway, because I'm in Manchester, and my company's always been in Manchester.
Oh,
so,
brilliant.
Yeah, so I've never really shot in London. We've just done a whole series which is coming out in January, which you all need to watch, called It's a Sin, which is about a group of young boys in London from 1980 to 1990, and we shot the whole thing in Manchester. We didn't leave Manchester once, so it's totally it's much easier filming outside of London. And we did film most of Last Tango in Manchester, not in Yorkshire, but all of Happy Valley was filmed in Yorkshire. So yes, it's great to have different locations, and those are some beautiful, you know, the countryside there is so beautiful. So it depends on what the story is, but I mostly film around the Northwest.
So how early on in production did you become involved in Happy Valley, and was this like worked on concurrently with Last Tango and Halifax, or were they sort of separate?
No, we were, very, very early. So we were doing, I think, the second series of Last Tango, and Sally had said to me that the BBC had said she could, for lots of complicated reasons, she could have an hour's commission, and would I work on it with her? So I said yes, and she said she wants to write something. Oh, so sorry, I just switched off my computer for a second. She wants to write something about a policewoman, about an ordinary policewoman, and there's a series in the 1970s or 80s which was called Juliet Bravo, which was about a Yorkshire policewoman in uniform who was just brilliant and clever and strong, and it wasn't a very well-known series, but Sally had always been obsessed by it. And then we also talked about the film Fargo, and that the policewoman in that film, and also the absurdity of crime. So she wanted to marry those two ideas. So she first started talking about it. It was only an idea at that point. And then we worked on it until she started writing the script. And she was absolutely obsessed by Sarah Lancashire in Last Tango. So she wanted it to be Sarah from the beginning. So she kind of wrote it with Sarah's voice in her mind and knowing that she was going to ask Sarah. And then happily Sarah agreed. So it became quite an easy thing to cast after that. But yeah, from the very beginning.
With the recent announcement of the third series, could I ask what made you want to go back to this world?
So I keep saying these things, they're all very complicated. There was always going to be 3 series of Happy Valley. And it's only that Sally went off to write Gentleman Jack that hasn't happened sooner. I'm not going to do the 3rd series with her. So because she's moved on to a different production company. So it all like changes as as different things happen and different events happen. But we'll see when that comes. I think as well she's doing another series of Gentleman Jack first, so it won't be for another year or so.
I guess moving on to Years and Years now, you spoke a bit about your discussion with Russell T Davies about how he came up with the idea. What did you think when you sort of first read the script after having these really in-depth discussions?
I thought it was extraordinary. His scripts come to me at so well developed because he's really rigid about his work. So he delivers a script that normal people would think would say is about 6 drafts. I know often with a lot of writers, I get something that doesn't make much sense, and I work with them on loads of drafts to make it better and better. With Russell, he's giving you something so well structured. So I thought it was absolutely extraordinary, and I loved it. And at the same time, I thought, oh, this is going to be incredibly hard, because television these days, especially, it just kind of it declares itself. Every series tells you in the first 5 minutes exactly what it is, exactly who the characters are, what the world is, and then you decide whether you're going to stay with it or not. And Years is the opposite to that, because by its very nature, it goes across so many years. You don't know what story you're watching. You don't know what to hold on to. It's a big disparate family. There's a lot of characters. It's really hard. And even though I thought this is brilliant, I know from experience how hard that is to sell to broadcasters, because they want something that they can sum up really quickly and say, this is what it'll say, and this is the little review that everyone will have. Everything's got to have an easy tagline, and Russell's work doesn't have an easy tagline at all. It's really complicated and it's hard to describe. And then the fact that I knew at the end of episode 1 you weren't going to end on a hook and then come back to it in episode 2, which is what every single other drama does these days. He was coming back to it 4 years later. Really hard when something is so different and so groundbreaking to get people to see that. So we had a lot of meetings with the BBC. We had a lot of discussions. I kind of implored to them that Russell's a national treasure, and his voice should be on screen. It just takes a long time to get people to see something when it's really different.
Yeah, so you mentioned that it was really difficult sort of getting it off the ground because it was so different and so groundbreaking, and then you got funding from HBO from the United States, and additionally a lot of your other programs have been broadcasted internationally as well using foreign broadcasters. Does it raise any challenges working with these different companies around the world, or is that?
Yeah, definitely, because their notes are very different from the British broadcasters' notes. So as well as doing everything that I described before, I have to listen to the people who are giving you the money and take notes from them, both at script stage and at edit stage, casting. So and what the different people want can be just from one end of the spectrum to another. So the BBC will want someone whose face is really recognisable on British television. And the Americans will want someone who has been in one film that once was slightly successful in America. And you've got to constantly balance those things. The notes that we would get from HBO, they were great actually, but they are very different from the notes you get from the BBC. And my job is to protect the writer from any notes that I think are just to make it different, and to give him notes that make it better. And so I've just constantly got to balance between those things. And if they're giving me conflicting notes, I have to make sure that either they have the conversation themselves or I can make everyone happy. It's just a constantly trying to make different voices happy. And yeah, American notes different. Whether it's kind of we had a note, the new thing I've just done with Russell has been paid for as well by HBO Max, which is different from HBO. It's this streaming service. They didn't know, they kept saying things like, why do people talk about putting money in a kitty? What's a kitty? There's just like literally some words they just don't understand. So those are easy notes to deal with. But tonally, HBO Max is much younger than BBC, than Channel 4. So I've got to balance tonally and make sure that everyone gets what they want. HBO Max wanted a lot of original music in it. Channel 4 didn't want so much original music. You just got to make everyone feel like you are putting them first, not the other person.
Speaking of notes and tone, Years and Years is weirdly current but also dystopian and set in the future. How did you sort of compromise between those two tones and make it seem realistic?
Well, I think the thing about Russell is the most important thing about his tone is it has to be funny. So actually, even though you say dystopian, it is dystopian in some ways, except it's not about a grim world where people walk around looking depressed and post-nuclear, even though it's post-nuclear. Everything that he writes has got a sense of humour about it and a warmth about it and a pace about it. And I think that's the most important thing that we get right tonally. Years and Years really, even though it's set in the future, is totally about now. And he was also, it's all about making people look at themselves and look at what we're becoming and why we're becoming that way. So it's quite easy really, because our future wasn't flying cars and hoverboards. Our future was just a bit more electric cars, and the mask that you see the daughter have in episode 1, and just a few touches of technology. But we didn't have a huge budget for it, so we couldn't afford much technology anyway. So we just wanted to make it a world that people can identify with. So it had to feel very real. There's like a talking fridge or something in the background, but there's never anything that feels sci-fi. That was really important to him, and he's done Doctor Who obviously, but he didn't want it to be sci-fi.
It did. It worked really, really well.
Thank you.
Speaking of the actual future, you've worked with Harlan Coben and Netflix on several occasions. How has sort of the influence and impact of streaming giants affected the industry, and how do you think it's going to change in the future? Speaking of like HBO Max as well, and even more people.
Yeah, well, it's changed everything really. So it's changed storytelling, because you have to keep an audience, and you have to make them desperate to watch the next episode and not want to turn off that streaming service. You have to do big serialized stories. So there used to be in British television stories of the week, where you'd dip into a television series and be able to watch one episode, and you didn't have to watch the next episode. But that kind of doesn't exist now. Every story, you have to hook people in, you have to make them come back, you have to make them want to watch it. Almost all stories now, even when we're making something for terrestrial broadcasters, have to work for streaming as well, because everything we make for the BBC now goes on iPlayer in 1 month. The new thing that we're making for Channel 4, that goes on all 4 straight away. So you have to be, ITV is still a bit slower at that, so you're still telling a story every week. So the way you tell stories has changed, and the budgets have changed just so dramatically. So when Netflix started throwing money around, people got paid more, and therefore it's very hard to make things now on the smaller budgets for the smaller channels, because everyone expects more money. And also the production values can be so high in something like The Crown, where they get 10 million an episode. We get 1.2 million an episode. So but we have to look as filmic and as visual as they look, and so you just have to up your game in every way really. It's good, it's making people try and be better all the time. But I think the way the budgets have just, it's a bit grotesque how much money can be spent now.
Well, we're talking about sort of budgets and money, and I know that with COVID there's been a lot of fear and anxiety about sort of the future of the industry, and money also plays a part into that. What do you think the future of film and television holds in a post-COVID world?
Well, we're still filming right now, so we filmed all the way through. We had to shut down for the first lockdown, and then we had to find a way to film again. And that way of filming is really painful and really slow and very expensive, like you say. But everyone's been very supportive with money to make sure that we can do it, because they need product on screen. So at the moment, it's just an incredibly hard world where masks are worn everywhere. You try and you have to write as much as possible to be made where people can stand 2 meters apart. We've cut down on the amount of extras that we have. We can't have many people in a room. We tried to not have locations where you can't open windows and doors, and still we've had positive tests, and still we've had to shut down filming again and again, which is really expensive. So right now, not post-COVID, mid-COVID, hopefully not mid, it's really tricky. Post, I don't think it'll make much difference. The American industry has been kind of ravaged by it and has restructured all its organizations. And, from Disney to Warner's, they've sacked an enormous amount of people, and they've tried to make lots and lots of savings. In a way, that's all really good for us, because, filming things in America is ridiculously expensive. If they want to spend money on a really good British production now, and we can do that, and we can deliver to them for a lot less budget than they work on in America. So that's not bad. And also what we've been developing through this whole year, almost everyone has said, don't give me anything that mentions COVID. We don't want to make dramas about it. We don't want to see it on screen. We don't want references to it. So, and we want really feel good, entertaining pieces that don't tax people and aren't dystopian in any way whatsoever. So it's been quite an interesting time for development, and a lot of money's been spent on development. So we've got lots of writers writing really great ideas. So it's not been terrible. We're very lucky compared to most industries. It's just really hard to work through, but it is for everyone. In all your bedrooms, I know. locked away, it isn't ideal for you either.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear that sort of we're still chugging along in the UK and things are still being made and produced. So speaking more about changes in the industry overall, we've seen the greater push for diversity, especially in television recently, such as with Channel 5's convention challenging historical drama that involves the Black actress Jodie Turner-Smith playing Anne Boleyn. So what's your opinions towards this, and where do you think sort of the responsibility lies with improving diversity within television? And do you think, I mean, we know there's more to be done, but how do you think we can sort of achieve this and sort of create the world we want to see on television?
It obsesses me, and it is a really massively important subject, and it's something which, you know, I've always tried to tackle from very early on, whether it's female writers, which there weren't many of when I started out, and way more Black actors and Asian actors on screen. There's a really big push now towards making sure that everyone behind the camera isn't white, and they are mostly, our crews are horrifically not diverse at all. So we have, for example, my latest production that we're making for Netflix, we've had a rule which is every single department has to have at least one diverse member of the crew. So from the camera team to costume, makeup, and it's not like there's loads of people that they go to. So we're training up a lot more people. We're extending the teams so that we can make sure that we have enough non-white members of the crew. But it's a really slow process, and I think as well we need to encourage a lot more writers, because you know what I have always done and done a lot of, and Russell does brilliantly, is make sure that there are loads of non-white actors in every single production we do. But that doesn't mean that we're telling different stories, and we're telling diverse stories, and that needs to come from writers' voices. So I think for me, it's really important that with my new production company, that my slate is really diverse, which means that I have writers who are looking at every part of society, who are from every part of society, and are absolutely determined to make that work. And it isn't just race, or it is also about disability. I think, you know, having a lead actress in Years and Years who's in a wheelchair just kind of opened our eyes to the fact that why haven't we done that before? It's absolutely crazy that isn't just taken as read, that you do that all the time. So everyone is very aware of it, and the broadcasters are really good as well. So some, like Sky, has always been brilliant at making sure, you know, not giving you the money to make the programme unless you are not a totally white production, or unless you're telling a really strongly diverse story. And Netflix is really good at it as well. You know, Netflix have percentages that you have to meet in order to get your budget, which I think is the only way to do it, to make people first. So I do think it's really different. That world I described that I came into in the BBC in 1992 or something was totally white, and now it really isn't. So it does feel like steps have been made, but not enough yet. There's a lot more to be done.
I really like your point you made, sort of about training people from through the pipeline, like getting people behind the crew. I think there's something we often forget when we see faces. There's also so much work to be done behind the camera as well.
Yeah, well, our new Netflix show with Holland Coburn has a Black actress in the lead, and she was brilliant, because she said to me from very early on, don't make me the only Black face in the read through. Which is, she said, I come in and that's it, because she's quite high profile. She got a role in a big American series called The Good Fight. So, you know, she gets a lot of parts, but then she can walk into a room and be the only Black face in there, and that's just awful for her. So she was really honest and just said, please don't make that happen. Or you mentioned the Lenny Henry thing that I did, which was the story of Lenny's story about him in the industry from, you know, a long time ago. And he said the same thing, which is, don't give me an all-white crew. Don't tell a Black story and then give me an all-white crew, because it's horrible. So I just think it's listening to people more.
100%.
Thank you. Soon we're going to have some questions from the audience. So while we ask our final question, please can you write your questions into the Q&A box down here, and then we will read them out. But while we're waiting, our final question is, do you have any TV or film recommendations for us to fill our isolation or lockdown terms?
Well, obviously everything I've ever made. So if you go on Netflix, watch all those Harlan Coben things. Actually, I think, you know, Happy Valley's on Netflix, and I think that's Tango's. There's some Years and Years is still on iPlayer, so do that. Me and Abby, my daughter, who's just sat there watching the next series, The Crown, and we like that. And she's just recommended to me, what's it called? The Queen's Gambit, which she said is brilliant, about a young woman playing chess. Don't know what else it's about. We quite like is it The Undone? Oh, The Undoing, which is the Nicole Kidman, Hugh Grant drama, which is utter nonsense, but really watchable. I just watched an amazing thing on Channel 4 called Adult Material, which is really extraordinary. 4 parts. It'll be on all 4 now. It's so good. Everyone should watch it. Trying to think. My other daughter's making me watch all 6 series of Glee. So I don't know if I'd recommend that, but we're nearly there. We've got 3 more episodes to go. So yeah.
Mammoth journey.
Yeah. And if you're in lockdown for a long time, yeah, try it.
My sister did the same thing, watched all of Glee in the first lockdown.
It's not easy.
Okay.
So our first Q&A question is from Joe, and he asked, from a writer's perspective, do you have any tips for getting in touch with producers without an agent?
Yeah, I would say to spot which producers you want to work with. So which producers would read your material and understand it. So who makes things like what you, similar to what you're writing, or who have made things that you really enjoy and you think would understand your voice, and send them your scripts. Most producers won't read those scripts, I'll be really honest with you, because they get lots, and most producers will only read scripts that come through agents, but some might, you never know. There's and then send them to agents, find out the good agents. There's only like 10 really good writers agents in this country, so find out who they are and get the names of agents, and you can do all of that online, and then send them to the agents and get yourself an agent. That would be very useful. But there are a lot of entry kind of, not competitions, but ways that you can get your material seen. So, you know, the Edinburgh Festival does a writers competition. Writers Room, the BBC Writers Room is brilliant for new writers. It gives you all kind of resources. It gives you loads of access to people. There's just competitions around the country, whether it's theatre competitions or film competitions. BFI does some as well. You know, just keep writing, and really the most important thing is to have the material, is to have, you know, even whether it's a short film, whether it's a long film, television episode, a theatre play, just make sure they can see your voice.
Amazing. So we have another Q&A question. So this is from an anonymous attendee who says, there's been a lot in the press about actors coming from Eton. Do you think there's more work to be done to ensure better representation by class and geography?
Yeah, definitely. And I think being in Manchester helps with that, because there aren't many actors from Eton in Manchester. And I think we definitely need a bigger representation across the board, and class is definitely part of that. And also it's very hard, I think, for people to go to drama school now, because there aren't grants for drama schools. So mostly it's people with money who get to go to drama school, which does mean that the range of actors that we see, I think that's gone in the wrong direction since I started. You can definitely see that there are, you know, you're seeing mostly middle class actors who are auditioning from drama school. But what I need to do as a producer is go out there with a casting director and find the right people. So you don't just go to agencies, you look at local theatre, you go and see local theatre all the time, you make sure you've seen short films, you make sure you know who's out there, you look at places like the Nottingham television acting courses. There's one in Bury near me as well that bring, you know, good actors come through those places. So yeah, it's our responsibility to go out and find those people.
Our next question is, what was the reasoning behind setting up your own production company, Red, and now your new production company, and what are the benefits of having your name out there?
Well, at first when I did it, I think I was just too young and stupid to think that it was a big risk. I didn't want to ever work on something that I didn't love. And I realized that if you're working for someone else, then you have to take the next job that comes along. And because for me, everything that I do is a passion project, and everything I do, I have to commit myself to, because it's such hard work, and I have to really, really like it. I didn't want to be given a script that I didn't like and be told to work on it. So I just decided to set up my own company. And it was the best thing that I did, because I very quickly met Russell, and I met another writer called Paul Abbott. I was in production on both their things within a year. and then I kind of was in production for the next 20 years. So it just was the right thing for me at the right time. I didn't like what a lot of the production companies were doing at the time, and I didn't want to work for the BBC, and I didn't want to work for ITV, so it was just right for me. And now it's right, it's going to be right. I'm starting again in January. To, you know, it again feels like the right time to be trying to do something new.
Definitely.
Amazing. Our next one's from Kira Mayers, I think. She says, do you think there will be a revival in independent British productions in the future in opposition to the American giants such as Netflix and Amazon? And if so, what direction do you think this will take?
I don't think British independent production stopped at all. I think it, you know, and I think it will always keep going, because even the big American giants know that they need different voices. And like I say, that even they run out of money, so they want the cheaper things, which is what we provide. So I think all I've got to do is keep believing in the integrity of the shows that I'm developing and the stories that I'm trying to tell. And then it doesn't matter whether I'm aiming them at a £6 million budget or a £1 million budget. If I believe in them, and if I think they're really great stories, I'll get them made. So I think that's the key, is the industry will change around you every month, and people lose their jobs every month. You've just got to believe in what you're doing and be really passionate about it. And then ideally you will get there.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Our next question asks, do you think the working world that we will be joining as students will allow us to follow passion projects, or do you think we will have to be increasingly market aware, or is it a bit of both?
I think it's a bit of both, but I think when I say passion project, it doesn't, you know, for me a passion project isn't someone sat with a candle talking poetry for 5 hours, which I would say is not very commercial. You know, so maybe I'm lucky. Maybe my taste is naturally mainstream, which means that I'm more likely to get a budget for it. If you are very art house, I think it is quite difficult. But I think it's always been difficult, because that's, you know, that's a minority audience. You're not aiming for a big audience. I've wanted everyone to watch everything I've ever made. You know, I don't want to just have a small part of the audience. So I think, you know, being commercial doesn't mean that you aren't passionate as well. I would say, in terms of the market that you're joining, I think, you know, the world is very scary at the moment, and it might seem that there won't be any jobs for a long time, but there will. And this, like, I think this industry is really resilient, and it will always need young talent, and it will always need new voices. And you know what? I'm already too old to tell a lot of the stories about, you know, people who are your age. And, you know, YA drama is amongst the most popular in the world. And I'm not saying that you're YA, you're probably older than that now, but actually you're closer to it than I am. So I need those people. Even if I'm running the production company, I need young voices. I need people to come and tell me that I'm being really old-fashioned. I need people to tell me about new ideas, new references, new everything. So yeah, there will always be opportunity. If you really go for it, there will always be opportunity.
Amazing. Our next one's from Kezzy Florence Sefton, who says, do you have a sense of responsibility for the negative effects of binge culture amongst young people?
Do you know what? As my parents would tell you, if they are on this, I was binging before binging existed. I was binging when there was no telly on, when there was just a card on waiting for the next programme. If you like, I binge books. You know, I want to read them and I want to finish them. I don't think binge culture is damaging anyone. I think it's just about people taking stories in and wanting to watch them immediately. I think it's brilliant. I can't understand the problem with it. So sorry. I take no responsibility for the problem. I'd say watch more.
Agree. Our next question is, who would you like to work with who you haven't worked with yet?
Oh gosh, there's loads of people. I won't mind working with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I think she's quite talented. Again, Jodie Comer, I think she's amazing. I think there's so many brilliant, a lot of women, you know, out there who I would really, really want to work with. I'm also glad I don't work with them, because it means that I can get to watch their programmes. So, you know, that's exciting for me. Writers that I look at, that you know, some series I just watch, and there was an American series called Unbelievable as well, which is still on Netflix as well, which is also worth watching. Just extraordinary writing. So all those great big authored voices. Aaron Sorkin is my favourite writer and my favourite American writer. And I'd love to work with him. I probably would not want to in reality, because it'd be too scary. But there's so many people.
Brilliant. So can you see yourself, this is another one, can you see yourself of working in theatre again? And if yes, why?
Not very easily. I can't see that very easily. I try and support theatre as much as I can because I do think that it gave me a lot. It gave me a lot more in my teenage years. There's a brilliant local theatre in Manchester called the Royal Exchange, and I loved going to see those productions. And I think they really challenged me and made, push my imagination. We did try and do a musical version of Queer as Folk, which is something that I made a long time ago. That didn't quite work. So yes, if it feels like the right material, but it's not something I'm actively going to do. I think there are brilliant people who work in theatre and they don't need me gigging
in. Our next question is, do you prefer making TV with traditional TV channels or with large streaming platforms like Netflix?
I don't mind, whoever will take it. I'm a total, whoever gives you the money, it's absolutely fine with me. It's a different experience. I think sometimes it's easier with those big streamers because they're a bit less hands-on. So they give you the money and then you go away and make it. But that's less true now. They're getting more and more involved. Sometimes it's great to just work with a local broadcaster because everything's really straightforward and very quick. There's something I'm making next year, which we got a decision on in a month and we're already in production, because it's just with ITV, it's very easy to do. So it's balancing. But honestly, whoever will make the stories I want to tell, I'll work with them.
Amazing. And there's one here as well. So I think what you were speaking about earlier about writers and agents, someone asked, how do you find an agent?
So I think if you Google writers agents, there'll be a list that come up. But I'll tell you, if there's a few of you who want to know, the big agencies that you should go to in the UK are Independent. They're all in London and you'll be able to find them online. Independent, Curtis Brown, now they've all gone out of my head. But honestly, if you Google writers agents in the UK, you should be able to get them. Those are the two big ones that I could think of. Oh gosh, they're on. Oh, the Agency. The other one, massive one, is called the Agency. And yeah, they're really good as well. And they've all got 15, 20 agents within them. So there's lots of different voices, and also there's always young agents who need new clients. So you just got to wow them with those scripts.
Amazing. Someone wondered, is there anything you can tell us about your projects in the pipeline and when they may be coming out?
Yes, I can. So my new one for Netflix is called Stay Close, and it's another Harlan Coben, and it's starring Cush Jumbo, Richard Armitage, Jimmy Nesbitt, and Sarah Parish, and that'll be on towards the end of next year. My new one that I mentioned that Russell has written is called It's a Sin, and it's on Channel 4 in January, and you've got to watch it because it's about that 1980s generation and when AIDS, HIV impacted on them. It's extraordinarily well written, and I think it's very, very well acted as well. So that's called It's a Sin. And then I've got something coming out on ITV in January called Finding Alice, which is totally the opposite. It's a story about a woman played by Keely Hawes who loses her husband, whose husband dies very suddenly, and the consequences on her of that. And then I've got one other one that I can tell you about, which is called Ridley Road, which is the story of a young Jewish girl from Manchester who goes to London following her love and ends up working undercover in the 1962 fascist organisation, all of which is based on the true story, and fighting that fascism. And it's a really fascinating story about now, but actually true in 1962. So all of those are quite different.
Sounds amazing. I will definitely watch.
Good.
So another one is, are there any stories so far that you've not told that you'd really like to tell but you haven't been given the opportunity to?
Oh yeah, there's loads of scripts that I wish we could have made that have never got made. Lots and lots. I never let them go either, so I'll remember them and then come back to them and try and tell them again. But it's often just sometimes it's the wrong time, the wrong people are in positions of power. Sometimes it's just actually it's not as good as I see it, and I come back years later and I realise that and realise how to make it better. But yeah, loads of stories that I want to tell that we never could.
Amazing. I think that's all we have time for, but thank you so much, Nicola, for your wonderful answers and for giving us your time. And thank you to everyone who joined the call and asked such amazing questions.
Thank you.
Please like our Facebook page for more updates and opportunities. We have just announced our screenwriting competition. Applications are open for that. That ends, I think, on the 16th of December or 15th of December, one of the two. And also you can apply to write a review for our website. It's really exciting. Our next Q&A is on Wednesday, the 25th of November at 7 p.m. with Sir David Hare, an Academy Award-winning screenwriter and playwright. And you can also sign up for that event on the Facebook.
Thank you again so much, Nicola, and have a good rest of your evening.